If you keep trying to convince me that I should like this book because it's meant to give hope to people with depression, I will jump off a bridge just to prove a point. Back to the kitchen, which means that this video is another episode of Cook and Book, where I cook very badly while I talk about books. Fun fact, my roommate from college recently reached out to me because he's in a group chat and the people there shared one of my videos to him and said, "Didn't you live with this bitch?" And that's how he discovered my YouTube channel. And he told me two things. One is, "Oh my God, this was so cool." And then the second was, "You cook exactly the same like you did back in college." So that really just goes to show how much I've improved. Another thing I've remain consistent on is book giveaways, because this video is sponsored by Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors to help readers discover new books that they love. Every month, their team vets hundreds of books and gives readers their own choice from a curated selection of new and early release titles so that you can spend less time researching and more time reading. It's totally risk-free, so you can skip any month, anytime, and you will not be charged. I have their selections for this month, and they include The Sweetest Remedy, a contemporary novel about a young woman on a soul-searching journey to reconnect with her Nigerian family and find herself. Beautiful Country, a memoir filtered through a child's eyes about a Chinese family struggling in the shadow of the American dream. The Love Hypothesis, a romance debut about scientists getting into a fake relationship. The Neighbor's Secret, an early release contemporary about a suburban book club that discovers life can be more disturbing than fiction when a vandal disrupts their neighborhood. And Rock, Paper, Scissors, a thriller about a remote anniversary getaway that turns eerie. This would be my personal choice for the month because I feel like now that it's getting close to autumn, reading a book that has a gothic atmosphere would be perfect. So giveaway details will be in my description below, but if you want these books guaranteed, you can use my code ReadWithCindy to get your first box for $9.99. Today, I'm gonna attempt to make Tex-Mex pork and pepper enchiladas. Just like how the food is probably gonna flop, so were the books that I read in the month of August, which I will tell you about. So the first book that I read this month is a book that I rated 1 star, and that is The Echo Wife. This is a book about a scorned woman who is a scientist, so we know she's a girl boss, but she's scorned because her husband decided to have an affair. He cheated on her by actually using her own scientific work to make a clone of her so he could bang the other clone instead. I feel like it's more of an insult that he stole her work to do the cheating in the first place. Like, that's just a whole new low. When will men stop being trash? Her clone is pretty much the opposite of the main character though, because she's very patient and gentle and obedient. So the two characters are pretty much like the two stereotypes of women. Like, the main character is the bitter bitch who's super focused on her career, and then the clone is the more submissive one who's like the stereotypical housewife. But that was what the husband had wanted in her, which is why he made a clone of her instead of, I don't know, divorcing her and just finding a normal fucking human being. The plot begins when the clone approaches the main character to tell her that she has killed the husband because the husband got really angry and violent, and so it was out of self-defense. Now the two wives have to figure out how to clean up the mess and not get caught. The entire time that I was reading it, I kept on thinking, what is the point of this book? Why is this book so boring? You literally have this juicy, scandalous affair involving an actual clone of the wife, and you somehow made it boring. Right when I started this book, immediately I got vibes for The Wives. And if you watch my review for The Wives, that is not a good thing at all. It similarly deals with an insecure woman who you can tell is kind of unhinged, being married to a man who ain't shit. It was very tiring to be stuck in her head because the protagonist is so unpleasant. I could feel the bitterness of a scorned housewife just radiating through the audiobook. And as a bitter bitch myself, I normally would be like, yeah, I get it. But to me, she felt like such a stereotype of the typical bitter feminist. The author definitely has gone through a shitty relationship or a divorce because she gets very detailed in how much of a scrub the husband was in the relationship and how much he failed as a significant other. And the details that she mentioned are the only details you would know if you have been in a relationship like that. I wasn't a fan of being stuck inside of her head because not only was she very unpleasant, she would randomly get bitchy for like no reason at all. And I'm not saying she's not allowed to be a bitch because there's tons of reasons for her to be bitchy, but sometimes it would just come out of nowhere. In general, she changes her motivation so quickly. So when you're stuck inside her inner monologue, it's like 1 minute she's angry at someone and then all of a sudden she feels bad for them and wants to help them out. But then in the next minute, she's angry at them again. And I'm like, bitch, I'm getting whiplash from reading this shit. It gives me the impression that the author is just like writing off the seat of her pants and just making shit up as she goes along because she's not pinning down an exact motivation for what this main character has. One moment she hates the husband, which is understandable, but then the next moment she's like, like, no, we have to save him. And then later she's like, you know what, screw him. And I'm like, bitch, just pick a side already. Do you hate him or not? Because it's giving me inconsistency without any actual reason for her to be inconsistent. Like, I would get it if she was that way, if she loved him deep down, but that bitch never loved him. Same thing for the clone. Like, one minute she's like, I want to smack the shit out of that bitch, and then the other second she's like, man, I do feel kind of bad for her though. I also thought the science in this book was very ridiculous. The whole time that I was reading it, I was like, is this shit legit? The book surprisingly gets detailed into how you make a clone by actually writing the entire process that comes with it, but it very much is described like this goop gets mixed up with this goop. And there's this one point where I had to write this line down because I thought it was so ridiculous. It's a scene where the main character opens up a book and the line says, it showed a long double helix of DNA with each nucleotide color-coded. That was one of the first things Nathan taught me. And I'm like, did you not know what a DNA helix looked like before? So I'm not really sure if the author actually knew that much about science. If the fact that when the main character opens up a science book, the only image that you see is a double helix. And apparently making a clone is like playing around with Play-Doh. The book isn't really a thriller. It's more of an attempt of a character study, but I don't think it was a very good attempt because I didn't understand the characters' motivations at all. It made no sense to me. They were just very confusing and inconsistent because first of all, you know, with the whole clone murdering the husband and then coming to the main character for help, why would the main character jump through all of those hoops to help the clone out for murdering the husband when she doesn't even like either of them? Why would the husband go through all the trouble of making a clone in the first place instead of just getting a divorce and signing up for OkCupid or something? There were so many things that didn't make sense because we never got to understand why the clone started developing her own feelings or even had a baby in the first place. We get tons of flashbacks to the main character's childhood that gets shoved down our throats that I thought was gonna lead up to something, but it didn't lead up to anything other than for the sake of making like a parallel, but we didn't get any explanations for why her childhood was so fucking weird. Every time we got a flashback, I was like, okay, maybe the parents are being weird because this is adding up to like a big twist. There was no twist, there was no explanation. Her childhood was apparently just really weird and that's it. So I'm reading a bunch of shitty science, but no actual thing happening. And I'm like, why? Some of my friends actually liked this book. And I think the reason why is because the way that they frame the ending of the book is kind of like girl boss. So I can kind of understand from that perspective because then it's like, ooh, we love to see a woman finally getting her way. But because she was so inconsistent and none of her actions made sense to me, I just felt like she was a very poorly developed character. She didn't make any sense. She was randomly bitchy at times and I didn't care for her. After that, I read The Midnight Library, which I rated 2 stars. In this book, the main character is very depressed. She feels like she has failed a lot of aspects in her life to the point where one day she decides to take her own life. But instead of dying, she ends up in a place called the library, which takes place in between life and death, where every book tells a story of a life that she could have lived if she had made a different decision. So this becomes a chance for her to kind of undo her regrets and see if she would have been any happier if she had taken a different path. So you follow her through different journeys, like if she had decided to marry this guy she was dating, if she decided to pursue a different career path, if she became famous or if she became a hermit. There's just like tons of infinite possibilities. And the whole point of her testing it out is so that she can figure out what would have been truly fulfilling in her life and what makes life worth living. So this is a book about depression, which is why I wanted to pick it up because I have it and I am also writing a fantasy book that is an allegory for depression. Obviously, with the main character deciding to take her own life, there is a trigger warning for suicide, and I will be making a lot of jokes about unaliving myself because that's just my sense of humor, but that might not be for everyone, so if that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to skip ahead. It very much is a corny Hallmark movie. Think of it like A Christmas Carol, where the main character is basically Ebenezer Scrooge, but depressed version, and she goes through all these different lives, and then she finds the meaning of Christmas. There are so many cheesy messages that get thrown in your face repeatedly, especially from the librarian, who basically just serves as a mouthpiece for what the author really wants you to know. Something that the librarian constantly says is, the only way to learn is to live. And you know, the first time she says it is pretty corny, but then she says it so many times throughout the book, and it's like, bitch, we get it. Her role in the story is to just teach the main girl that there's always gonna be problems in every life. Like, you'll never be truly happy even if you got everything that you wanted, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, if I were the main girl, I would be so fucking annoyed by her. I would ask her to just kill me already. Like, she was so eager to try out all of these new lives, and I get it, like, it's kind of cool at first, but then after a while it gets so repetitive and predictable. Like, she's a rock star, but then she's like, oh my god, you mean fame doesn't bring me true joy? What do you mean being famous isn't everything? Here's the thing, if you get depressed enough for you to kill yourself, and I have contemplated it many times ahead, at that point you're fucking done. You don't want to do this shit anymore. You don't want to deal with life. So why would you go through all of these different versions of life when it still requires you to live? When you get to that point, you're at the end of your fucking rope. I would straight up tell the librarian, no, I don't care about any of these lives, just fucking kill me right now. I don't want to live. I don't want to live. That's the whole point of this. That's the whole point of why I unalived myself. I don't want to live. Like, I'm fucking tired. Your solution for me, after I just tried to kill myself, is to force me to live several lives? Forget the library being the in-between. This feels like a punishment. This feels like a form of hell where you're forced to repeat several dissatisfying lives and deal with some corny ass librarian every time you return, where she's like, wow, I guess that wasn't the perfect life after all. I guess the only way to learn is to live. And then she shoves toxic positivity in the form of cheesy one-liners in your face. There is a literal quote where she says, never underestimate the big importance of small things. And I'm like, bitch, I can just read this from a fortune cookie. I don't need you to try to teach me about how wonderful life is. We get scenes where the librarian is also playing chess too, and I'm like, of course this bitch fucking would. Nothing about this book is subtle at all. So of course she has to play chess to represent the metaphor of how every decision influences the game that is called life. Oh my god, it's like by watching the librarian play chess, it's almost as if life is like chess, because any move that you make can change the whole game. It's really deep and nuanced if you think about it, but you don't have to think about it because the book literally spells it out for you. Another actual quote that the librarian says about chess is, and this is word for word because I wrote it down, she says, you need to realize this, the game isn't over, ... until it's over. Yeah, when the fuck would it be over? When it's not over? I wrote down another cringy quote, this time not from the librarian, but from the main character, because there is this one life that she experiences where she is an Olympic athlete, and she has to give like a TED talk from people who want to learn more about her successful life. And yes, of course, predictably, she learns that being successful doesn't truly make you happy. Wow, this is a lesson that nobody has ever learned before in their life. But anyway, in her TED talk, because she just jumped into this life, she hasn't prepared the speech ahead of time, so she has to improvise, and this shit was the most embarrassing shit ever. And ... and the thing is ... the thing is ... what we consider to be the most successful route for us to take actually isn't. Because too often our view of success is about some external bullshit idea of achievement, an Olympic medal, the ideal husband, a good salary, and we all have these metrics that we try and reach, when really success isn't something you measure, and life isn't a race you can win. Oh my god, life isn't a race you can win? That is so true, because she's an Olympic swimmer. So she literally races against other people, but she's not just talking about that race, she's talking about the race of life. Wow, who would have thought that this would be the lesson after she experiences that lesson several times in every single fucking life that she goes through. Okay, I have my pico de gallo ready and my cream ready. Now I'm gonna toss my bell peppers and pork into the pan. And then one of the stupidest parts that happens is the spoilers. I'm gonna put an image somewhere on the screen for you to mute if you don't want to hear it. But this is like the climax of the book. It's towards the end where she realizes she wants to live after all. Not in any of these other lives, but her own life where she came from. But then the library is crumbling down and she has to figure out what to do so that she can escape. So the solution for this is that she opens the book of her future. And when she opens it, she realizes that it's totally blank because it's unwritten. So in order for her to have a future, she has to write inside of the book of her future. And I'm like, bitch, this is literally the song Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield. This entire book could be condensed by the lyrics of Unwritten. If there was a slogan for this book, it would be called Live, Love, Laugh. So in the end, she's able to return to her life. And now that she's back, she is just automatically happy now. Now she doesn't have depression anymore because she learned to be grateful for what she has. It is is totally unrealistic to see that the main character is now suddenly happy in the end. You do not wake up from a traumatic event and then everything is suddenly magically okay. Like, that's just not how it works at all. Even if you do finally feel happy later on, with depression, you are bound to have a lot of bad days or bad weeks or bad months even. This wasn't really a depiction of depression at all. It was more just a depiction of someone who was very dissatisfied in her life. And then she went on a drug trip where she saw a bunch of things and now she's chill with it. I really hate using this type of pan because it's always so heavy. Like, you literally have to lift it with both hands. Just like how this book was also heavy-handed. Subtlety? We don't know her. This is what I dread every time I post my Goodreads, because I'll always have some random person commenting on whatever I read about my opinion on my own Goodreads page. So what I wrote was that it was corny like a Hallmark movie and probably the least subtle book I've ever read. And then I got people in my comments going like, it wasn't supposed to be subtle though. It was supposed to give a strong message about depression. First of all, repeating a line like the only way to learn is to live over and over isn't giving a strong message. Second of all, just because a book isn't supposed to be subtle doesn't mean I can't criticize it for not being subtle. That's like if I was complaining about a character being annoying and someone was like, well, that character wasn't supposed to be likable. Okay, so that doesn't change the fact that they're still fucking annoying. I had people trying to explain to me that the author also goes through depression, which I do know about. I did read his nonfiction book about it, and how the book was meant to provide hope for people that struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts. And I'm like, yeah, I can tell, because once again, the book wasn't subtle at all. You don't have to explain the intention of the book, because if I say that a book is not subtle, that means I got the message pretty clearly. If people can benefit from this book, good for them. But for me, this book made me want to die. So I guess that really goes to show the range that the author has in his impact, doesn't it? Oh, this book saved you from depression? Cool, because it became my 13th reason. If another fucking person tries to explain to me why this book wasn't supposed to be subtle, or that it's a deep message for depression, I will kill myself and I will write the author's name in my suicide note, and I'll write your fucking name too, and I'll change the trajectory of your entire life. Yeah, I tango with depression. You think I wouldn't hesitate to do that? Just give me one extra reason to do it, and I fucking will. If I have to hear the librarian say one more fucking fortune cookie lesson, this will be my 13th reason. If you keep trying to convince me that I should like this book because it's meant to give hope to people with depression, I will jump off a bridge just to prove a point. Don't underestimate me. I have very little regard for my life. Literally last night, I ordered sushi delivery. It was $39, and I told my friends, if this food doesn't turn out good, I will kill myself because I have nothing else to live for. So don't fucking test me. Obviously, because I'm still here, the sushi turned out fine. Anyway, I'm done with my rant. Now it's time to assemble the enchiladas. So the next book that I read was The Heart Principle. This follows a violinist who is dealing with burnout because she recently had some viral success and she is now afraid to replicate that success. She also deals with burnout in general because she's autistic, but she doesn't know it yet. So something that she does a lot is mask, which is try to cover up what she's actually feeling to try to blend in with other people, which gets very tiring after a while. So she's just very overwhelmed and exhausted. At the same time, her long-term boyfriend suggests that they have an open relationship because he wants to see if there are better options out there. So she gets really upset by it and she decides that he's gonna go ahead and sleep around with a bunch of women, then she will go and have a bunch of one-night stands as well. This is a chance for her to be a bit more rebellious so she can find more unsuitable men who would be more fitting for a one-night stand. The main guy is one of the guys that she hits up, who is a motorcyclist. He has a bunch of tattoos. He's kind of like the bad boy. He used to be a womanizer, but he recently had some health issues where his body was altered a little bit, and that has put him out of the game with women because now he's feeling a bit more insecure about his body. But out of the persuasion of his family, he decides to get back in the game again. He gets on a dating app, and that's how they meet. So they try to have a one-night stand. It doesn't really work out, but they have a really nice date. And so they're like, okay, let's try this again for round 2. They don't have sex the second time that they meet up or the third, so they just keep on hanging hanging out. And so they just end up in a situation where they're basically like, yeah, he's like my fuck buddy, except we're not actually fucking. We just like to spend time with each other and get to know each other better and care about one another, but it's totally physical. They fall for each other pretty quickly. However, there ends up being a tragedy in the main character's family that requires her to take care of a relative. This is super overwhelming for her because not only does she have to deal with the grief of losing a loved one, she also has to deal with the rest of her family that has very high expectations of what she should be, and they aren't very understanding of her autism, which pressures her to mask herself even more. So the romance actually takes more of a back burner halfway through the book, and is more so focused on the self-individualization of the main character as she tries to figure herself out and fight for what she wants in her life and stand up for herself. I noticed that people who weren't into the book actually had a problem with that shift because it took a step away from the romance. I don't mind when a romance book decides to tackle heavier subjects because, I mean, that's just life. And I do like that the book focuses on the main character's personal development instead of just a romance, because I feel like that's important too. You have to work on yourself before you get into a relationship, rather than the relationship doing the work for you. The reason why I wasn't into this book and I ended up rating it 3 stars was just for the execution. I read the author's note, so I do know that a lot of the story came from a personal place for her and how she deals with grief and the pressures of masking and having family members not understand your autism and what you're going through. So I do sympathize for her for that. But critically speaking, I don't know if her writing style can really develop the story as deeply as I would have liked it. She has very simplistic writing, which I think works for a lighthearted, fluffy romance because that doesn't really require complicated prose. But when it comes to tackling heavier subjects like grief, I don't think it is as impactful. What's kind of a bummer too is that the main guy is a character that you have seen in the other books that the author has written, and he is a pretty likable character. When you read him in other books, it seems like he is set up to do more, and then when you read this book, it kind of falls flat because he was given the back burner for most of the story. So I do wish that we at least got to see more of his personal development if we were going to see the main characters as well. He was relegated into the role of the supportive boyfriend where he was just given a lot, being the perfect boyfriend, being super patient as she was going through all of that stuff. But then it's kind of like very one note. All he does is just give and give and give, but he barely has a story of his own. I didn't understand why they liked each other other than physical attraction. They were just so ready to take it serious, which doesn't make sense because they didn't really know each other that well, and their intentions in the first place weren't supposed to be serious anyway. So I don't know how that happened. Out of the 3 romance books that this author has written, I think my favorite would be the first one, The Kiss Quotient, because that one was just like a lighthearted, fluffy romance without trying to be anything else. And I think the personal issues that both the main characters had in that story was more evenly split without sidetracking to only one character. All right, before I get into the last book, check out me topping the enchiladas with this red doo-doo. And then we're gonna top it off with some cheese. Now let's set it in the oven. Okay, so while we wait for the enchiladas in the oven, I'll talk about the last book that I read, which was a memoir called Made. It starts off with the author at 28 years old who had dreams about moving out of her hometown and going to university to become a writer, but then she unexpectedly becomes pregnant and she decides to keep the baby, which means that she is stuck in her hometown, and while she's taking online classes, she ends up working as a house cleaner to make ends meet. The way that the book is described and from the title, it seems like it's going to talk about her experiences as a maid, along with the different houses that she has had to clean up for, in contrast to the life that she has, which couldn't be any more different because she is living in poverty, she has to rely on government assistance, she has had to stay at homeless shelters. The book ended up not really touching upon her life as a maid or the houses that she cleaned, but there is one thing that you know for sure, which is that she is living the struggle life because it's really fucking hard out there when you live in poverty. One moment. My enchiladas are ready. I know that felt like a short time, but the recipe said to only put it in the oven for 3 minutes. So this is what it looks like. I I am gonna top my enchiladas with the cream and the tomatoes that I mixed together. I'll try to wrap up this book because I want to eat right now. I generally liked the book. I appreciated all the emphasis on how much of a fucking struggle it is to be poor. There's so much that you have to worry about when you're in poverty, because not only do you have to figure out like all the logistical stuff to stress over, but there's also the emotional turmoil that comes with it. Because when you don't have a safety net, if anything bad happens, like you get into a car accident or anything that requires money, that really pushes the limit for you. Plus, there's so much stigma that gets associated with people who need to have like food stamps or people who are just homeless in general. And she talks about like the judgment that she often receives from people and the assumptions that people have about her. So I sympathize for her a lot. Everything in life is so much harder when you're poor, and people who were born rich and have never really struggled don't truly realize everything that comes with it. Like, it's so stressful. Because like, even if you later on become a rich, privileged bitch, you have to unlearn some of the habits and some of the mentality that you have, because you get so used to thinking like, oh my God, I could lose it at any point. And then it just prevents you from like enjoying your life. So yeah, I'm really glad that she shed light on a lot of those things. That being said, I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I usually give memoirs like 4 to 5 stars, but this one just didn't really impact me as much. Again, the author tried to frame the book around being a house cleaner from like the title and the description, but we didn't really get that. Like, I think she aimed to show the contrast of all these rich people houses that she was cleaning up versus her own apartment that literally had mold that was making her daughter sick. But it felt more like anecdotal pieces rather than a metaphorical framework. It didn't really go any deeper beyond just describing her clients' houses. And in the few times where she actually did talk about what it was like to be a house cleaner and the different houses that she went to, she tried to give some insight about what the rich people's lives were like their experiences with sadness and with love. And I think she was trying to kind of tie it back into like humanity and everything, but it didn't really work because these are all just assumptions. You don't really know what their lives are like. You just are making up these stories in your head based on the random things that you saw around their house. It didn't really have much of a basis. It just felt like she was trying to be introspective, but it didn't quite hit the mark. I think what she should have been more introspective of is her own life. Most of the book is focused on what it's like to be a struggling mother and not have any safety net. I think there were plenty of opportunities to really go deep with this because, for example, her parents did not really help her at all. And she mentions her parents every now and then, but she doesn't explain why they're so absent. Why were they so neglectful in helping her? It felt like there were missing pieces to this story there. She could have talked more about how the US system keeps people in poverty, because obviously she has had a lot of experience trying to seek assistance from the government, but there are so many hurdles that come with that. So I think that could have been a really insightful way of examining like how lackluster the policies that we have in this country are. She could have examined all of the factors for, one, how she ended up in the situation in the first place, you know, with her family and the lack of support, and 2, how she was kept in that situation in the first place with more of like a structural level with how the country operates. But there was a lot of self-reflection that she could have made as well, but it never really hit there. It just felt like she was describing things and how shitty it was, which I understand it is very shitty, but like, why is it so shitty though? How does a shitty situation like this even happen? And why does it keep on happening? I really wish that she had gone deeper in that aspect. Overall, this month was obviously very meh for me, so I'm gonna go ahead and commiserate over my enchiladas, which honestly, it didn't turn out so bad. I would feel like this is 3 stars. I'll see you next time, unless you unsubscribe, which I hope you do. Goodbye.
Everyone tells me not to get